Today on the channel, we're going to be taking a look at the Syndicate Collectibles 1/12 scale Pumpkinhead figure. This figure is a long time coming. We haven't had many different figures of this character before, but Syndicate Collectibles has blessed us with this brand new 1/12 action figure. So we're going to take a quick look at the box and then we'll discuss the figure. Here is the figure's box that it comes in when it's shipped to you, or if you find it in stores somehow, somewhere. You can see it says Pumpkinhead 1/12 collectible figure, Syndicate Collectibles down there at the bottom. Much like a NECA Ultimate figure, you can open up this window to reveal the figure if you so wish to keep it in the box. Right there, there is a little tagline, says nothing can call it off, and you can see Pumpkinhead inside the destroyed church from toward the end of the movie. The box has this sort of wood aesthetic to it. Very, very nice. It's kind of hard to pick up on camera. It's quite dark, but here's some legal garble, as well as Syndicate Collectibles, MGM, Pumpkinhead, and this little I don't know, you would call it relic at the top there. Very, very cool. Same stuff kind of applies to this side, and there's a little window at the top if you'd like to see the figure. You know, more legal stuff at the bottom. I just knocked him over. But that is the box. So now let's take a look at the figurine itself. Alright, so let's take a closer look at Pumpkinhead. This figure is super, super awesome, super beautiful, and the detail is just incredible. We're of course going to start with that awesome detail. You can see the sculpt work on this figure is beautifully done, from the crazy looking face he has there to all the different little bulbous parts of his brain, all the veins sticking out, the skeletal structure. Everything is done super, super nice. I love that you can see all the different kind of muscle groups on him. The tail has very nice sculpt detail in it as well, all the way down to the end of it. You can see on his feet, the nails are just gross and pointy and lethal looking. Very, very, very cool. One thing that I really appreciate on this figure is the veins. You'll notice that the veins are fully sculpted. They're not just painted on. They stick out, they pop. It really adds a lot to the figure. Really makes him look gross and vile and just really, really scary. Paint on this figure too is exceptional as well. You'll notice that he's mostly a singular flesh tone, but deeper in the crevices is the shadows, right? And those are more so purple and dark brown and more of a deeper tone, which really gives the figure depth, and he really stands out, brings him to life. If you look at the face, that same type of shading applies to the eyes, which are sunken in, very, very dark and creepy looking. Paint overall gets like a 10 out of 10. Very creepy. Not sure if I showed his back yet, but you can see all the crazy details on the skeletal structure of his back with all the bones protruding. He looks like malnourished, and but he still looks powerful and scary. Very, very cool and very, very scary as well. The only real gripe I have with the paint is, like with a lot of figures, especially if you collect Godzilla figures like I do, but the teeth in some areas could definitely use a little work, but that's barely a complaint. And if you really, really want to, if you can do light customizing, you can very easily remedy that, of course. Articulation on this guy is mostly very good, but it is flawed quite a bit, which we'll talk about here. Now, it's really the only part of the figure that's holding it back from being like a perfect 10 out of 10 figure, and it may just come down to quality control with my print specifically, but regardless, I'm going to go over it with you. The head is on a kind of ball joint, but it's hard to really get a full motion without it wanting to pop out like that, and having this stay on can be a little challenging. It might be something you need to heat treat, but you'll see you can get it on, but it still doesn't really click on, and I think the same thing is going to apply to the rest of the heads. You can actually get a good range of motion out of it. You just need to make sure that it's not about to fall out. He can't look down super, super far. I guess he could, but it's not the best. Regardless, it's still really good. You just want to be careful you're not about to lose the head, right? Moving down to the torso, there is, again, I believe another ball joint here at the rib cage, and you have minimal motion out of that, but still good for posing him overall. Again, another ball joint at the waist. You get a fair bit of motion out of it, but it's still a little limited. You can't really rock him side to side. He can lean back quite far and forward quite a bit, but it still gets the job done. Moving back up to the shoulders, these joints pretty much get the full range of motion you'd want out of your arm joints. Singular jointed elbows, which are fine. You can really just get a 90-degree bend and then a straight arm like that. Similarly, in the wrists, you have just a single pin joint with a hinge. These are fairly tight. You do want to be careful not to break the joint off, but you can get his hand into pretty simple poses, but all you would really need out of Pumpkinhead. Do be careful about these nails. You don't want to accidentally break them off. I find that during this review I'm hitting them quite a bit, so just be very wary of that. Then we move down to the legs. Legs are similar to the shoulders. This is where my problems start to appear, and that is these leg joints can be a little loose, making it hard for him to stand, so do be mindful of that as well. His knees, however, are pretty stiff, so that's mostly good because it's going to support the weight of this figure. This is a fairly heavy figure, again single jointed, so you can really only get this barely 90-degree angle out of it, as well as a mostly straight angle. Pumpkinhead has the two joints in his leg. This joint down here, same thing. This one can actually twist a little bit. Actually, they both can, up here and down here. So you do get a wide range of motion as far as the legs go when you pose them. Moving down to the feet, again, same type of joint as the rest of the leg. It's actually pretty stiff. You can bend these feet up or down to get his toes into a better pose for standing if you so wish. It can also turn and swivel quite a bit. You'll notice too there's a peg hole on his left foot. I highly recommend picking up a stand if you don't already. It'll probably help out Pumpkinhead quite a bit. Flipping him around, we can look at his tail, again on sort of a ball joint or a like a single pin joint. It can swivel around as well as has a hinge, which is actually very helpful. And then the rest of the tail is a bendy wire, so similar to the NECA aliens. Pretty much what you would expect out of a figure like this, I suppose. It's not like a Godzilla tail where there's individual segments. This is a bendy wire tail. Again, over time that can be an issue, but realistically, if you're not going to be playing with the tail that much, it's not that too big of a deal, right? And then I love the posability you can get out of him. It's just, again, you want to be careful with the legs because Pumpkinhead can easily fall if you don't have him in a decent pose, but he can look menacing and you can get him into these like attack poses. Very, very cool. Or maybe you want him to be a little more sneaky. You can get him into any pose you really need him to be. So the articulation is really, really good. You can just see though that the legs, especially around the waist or the thighs, are just a little too loose for my liking, and a stand would definitely help. So now let's talk about the accessories. Pumpkinhead comes with this cross, which is really nicely detailed. You can see that it's mostly a black color for the darker areas with a lighter brown on top. I believe he uses this as a weapon at some point, and this hand here can actually hold the cross if you just place it in. Holds it pretty well, a little loose, but you never want it to be too tight that you might break the hand. So to put this on, all you're gonna do, so similarly to my Burning Godzilla video, I'm struggling to get his hand off and I really just don't want to break it. One thing you should definitely be aware of is around the wrist, especially where the joints are actually fairly tight. If you are moving this quite a bit, you can see where the plastic is beginning to tear off, so that is definitely a bit of a concern when it comes to the quality of this figure. So being that I've been trying for like 5 minutes to get the hand off, I'm just not going to do it. Again, I don't want to risk breaking the figure. Regardless, I kind of wouldn't personally pose him with the cross in hand, just because I think it makes for a nicer piece to have on the side, but you obviously have the option to use it like this if you can get the hand off of the figure. The heads that he comes with, the two additional heads, we have these two right here. One is a more smiling, laughing head, because as you know, if you've seen the film, Pumpkinhead takes great pleasure in what he does. He's very maniacal and evil. And then, of course, we have a more chill expression. Surprised we got this one, but it's definitely a nice one to have. This shouldn't be too hard to swap the pieces out, so I'll show you what that looks like in a minute. So here's Pumpkinhead with the laughing head, or it can even be like a shocked expression, or maybe he's roaring or yelling at someone. Definitely looks good. I prefer the closed mouth head, or the default head that we were looking at originally. Now what we're going to do, we'll swap out this one for the neutral face. So here he is with the more neutral expression. Again, not my favorite, but it's nice that you have the option if you feel so inclined. So now that we've taken a look at Pumpkinhead, what are some other figures that you may have in your collection, and how are they going to scale with Pumpkinhead? Of course, Pumpkinhead is a 1/12 scale figure, so he is meant to scale with other 1/12 figures. Truthfully, the only other 1/12 scale figure I own is the Silent Hill 2 Pyramid Head from Mezco's 1/12 line, and you can see that he scales pretty nicely with him. If this was just a normal looking 1/12 figure and not Pyramid Head, the character's head would be around here, so you can sort of see how that lines up with Pumpkinhead. Pumpkinhead definitely towers over other 1/12 scale figures, but I think a lot of you are going to be wondering, how does he scale with, let's say, a NECA 7-inch figure? So here's Pumpkinhead with the ultimate NECA Freddy Krueger and Halloween 2 Michael Myers. You can see, again, Pumpkinhead towers over these two figures, even though they're at a slightly larger scale. Now, in my opinion, this looks great next to each other. Theoretically, a NECA Pumpkinhead, if it was going to scale with Freddy and Michael here, he would actually be quite bigger than the one we have here, but this figure still just towers over NECA figures, so I think it works out pretty well. In addition to the NECA figures, here is the 8-inch retro-clothed Candyman, who is, again, 8 inches tall. Even then, Pumpkinhead is still quite taller and larger than this figure, and I think it still looks pretty good next to Candyman. And now for something that scales a bit more accurately to Pumpkinhead, and that is the Bandai, what is it called? Beyond the Abyss series, I believe it's what it's called. Demogorgon. This is a much larger figure than Pumpkinhead here, but you can still see they scale pretty nicely next to each other, and they kind of complement each other. They're kind of similarly designed creatures, but you can see that the Demogorgon is slightly bigger than Pumpkinhead here. This is probably what you'd expect out of, let's say, if NECA were to create a Pumpkinhead. I do have him quite crouched down now so he can be with Pumpkinhead here, but you'll notice his proportions are quite larger than Pumpkinhead. Regardless, these two look pretty good next to each other. And for a final comparison shot, we have the original Movie Maniacs Pumpkinhead, and you can see it's night and day, the quality. And I mean, this came out when, either late 90s, early 2000s, not quite sure, but you can just see the evolution of just technique and technology and just, I don't know, skill that went into the newer figure. Way better articulation, way better detail, way better paint, but the one on the left from McFarlane is still an awesome collectible to own, and I guess would be considered vintage at this point. But the new updated Syndicate Collectibles Pumpkinhead is just super accurate, super cool, and definitely an awesome figure to have. So let's wrap it up with the final verdict. So the question is, should you buy the Syndicate Collectibles Pumpkinhead figure? If you are a fan of horror and a fan of Pumpkinhead specifically, yes, you should definitely buy this figure. It scales mostly well with other horror figures you may own, albeit he may just be a little smaller than you're wanting him to be. I personally think he looks great. Detail and paint are exceptional. Like, there's no competition. He looks amazing. He's sculpted amazingly. Everything about that aspect is great. The only drawbacks is when it comes to articulation. For what is here, the tooling, everything is done super well. You can get him into a ton of great poses. It's just that the looseness of some joints can really hurt the figure, especially when he struggles to stand at times or he's falling over. Definitely get a stand for him if you want to get him into more crazier poses than just what I have here. But regardless, the thighs and the lower legs tend to be a little loose, which could just make posing him a bit of a pain. So that is definitely something to take note of when you're going out to purchase this figure, and that may just be a quality control issue as far as my copy goes, right? But it may not be an issue for you per se, but we'll just have to wait and see when more people get their hands on this figure. So overall, yes, I highly recommend you pick it up. It's an awesome figure, great detail, super accurate, and it just goes perfectly along with your other horror collectibles. And this character in particular has been a need for horror fans for many, many years, and I think we've just satisfied that hunger for this figure just by this one alone. So definitely worth the wait. Very long time coming. Definitely picking up. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed the video, please subscribe for more. I have plenty of horror figures, plenty of Godzilla figures that I'm willing to share with you all. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.